back to All Things Special About Education. I'm Andrea Masterson. I'm the Donor Engagement Consultant of the Board of Directors for KY IEP Advocate. I'm here with our host, Shannon Masterson, who is also the founder and executive director of KY IEP Advocate. And today we're talking about what happens if you disagree with the initial evaluation and what that process looks like. So Shannon, can you kind of dive in and talk us through what that looks like when you disagree with what that evaluation says?
So if you get that report ahead of time and you're going over it with other providers that your child sees, or you're looking at it yourself, or in real time in the meeting as they're explaining it to you, you're listening to it, you're looking at it, and you're thinking, this does not describe my child. If you are having those thoughts, then that's a good indicator that you disagree with the assessments that were done. If you are struggling to connect the assessment results with what you actually see in your own child, sometimes that's because a skilled evaluator is looking at different things than you're looking at. So maybe you just don't see it. And as you talk more about it, that's where it's really valuable to have a good discussion about the importance and the meaning behind all of these assessment results. Maybe then you'll be like, oh, okay, I understand. This does make more sense. Now I do see this. I just thought it was something else, or I didn't know that I should be expecting that, or maybe I'm expecting too much. But if in general, you're reviewing assessment results and you're thinking, this is not a description of the kid that I see and interact with and communicate with every day, then likely it is that you disagree with their assessments when they did it. So you have the opportunity in the meeting as you're going over these things to disagree, to state that you disagree with these assessments. You also have the opportunity after the meeting. I encourage, even if you bring it up and you say it in person and it's recorded in the notes, that's all fine and good. But I also encourage everybody to follow up with an email after the meeting and say, as we discussed, or maybe you didn't discuss it and you reflected and then you do disagree. Regardless, I disagree with the assessment results that we discussed on this date in the ARC meeting. This is my formal written request for an independent educational evaluation. That's what you want when you disagree with the assessments that the district does.
And then what happens next? You're going to get that. You've got it in writing. Pro tip, using that email address that you might have set up specifically for this entire process. Then what happens next on the school district's end?
So when you send in that request, so this all comes from page 4 of the procedural safeguards. So that document that they hand you at the beginning of every meeting, or at least once per year, but usually at the beginning of every meeting. The bottom of page 4 describes what an independent educational evaluation is and describes your right as a parent to an independent educational evaluation. So it's another reason why it's important to say, yes, I'll have another copy of those, because then that can be at your fingertips. So once you make that formal written request for an independent educational evaluation, then the district, when they approve it, they could also not approve it and file due process if they're going to stand by their assessment results. I don't know how often that happens, but it's a possibility, and that is clearly stated in the procedural safeguards that they could do that. That is a lot of time, effort, and energy, as opposed to them approving an independent educational evaluation. So also, yes, it feels like a very big deal, and not to say that going to due process is not a big deal at all. But if they file due process on you, then you could also just drop your request and say no, thank you. So don't feel intimidated by that.
It's good to know.
But when they approve your request for an independent educational evaluation, districts will have a list of preferred providers, so people that they work with. Sometimes that's beneficial because you're able to get in a little faster if they leave open spots on their calendar to do independent educational evaluations. You might be able to get in a little faster rather than waiting 6 months, because
Mm.
6 months might be a short wait too. Um, as a community provider, I would never put my license on the line and my business on the line for a school district that doesn't pay my salary. But I also appreciate the thought process that says, don't even put somebody in that position to do that. So when you get that list, you can use people on that list, or you can use anybody else that you want. It's up to you what you want to do with that list. Sometimes people like to know who not to go with, and that's what they use that list for it. And some people like to know who to go with, and they go with that list. It's up to you where you go as the parent. And the district will also give you a list of the qualifications for the evaluator. So I'm an OT. From the OT perspective, an OT does the assessment at school, and an OT who is licensed to do assessments will be doing the assessment outside of school. Your speech therapist cannot do an occupational therapy assessment. An OT assistant cannot do an occupational therapy assessment. They can't do it at school, and they can't do it outside of school. So your person that you choose has to meet the qualifications that the district outlines for you.
And I imagine that there are pros and cons to going with the person that you are choosing, or the person that is listed on this kind of list of providers that the school district gives to you in kind of like super high level terms, or you can kind of like hit a few of those top ones.
If your kid sees an outpatient therapist who knows them really well, they're probably a really good candidate to give an accurate assessment. So that's good if you're looking at PT, OT, and speech. If you see a psychologist outside school who is a psych evaluator, that could be really beneficial as well. Word of mouth, asking for recommendations, who's going where, that's also really helpful. Making more than one appointment at places when you're looking at what could be a long wait list, then getting on a wait list. It's just like getting on a wait list for outpatient therapy. Get on as many as you can. If you're open to going places, you can always go. You can always have the phone call for the initial, conversation about the independent educational evaluation. And this place doesn't feel right, and they're not going to do the test that you need. No problem. You're on a wait list for 3 other places. So
Yeah.
Kind of covering your bases and making sure you're on waitlist for places that you're comfortable with is really important.
Yeah. And then just logistically, once you have chosen the provider, you know where you would like to go for that independent educational evaluation, then what happens next?
You go. You wait.
You make
wait.
You make the appointment and you go.
Yeah.
Again, putting everything in writing, making sure that you've got that communication back and forth with the school district, letting them know which one you've decided to go with, and all of those kinds of things, right?
And that a district pays for an independent educational evaluation. That is in the procedural safeguards. It's very specific about saying an independent educational evaluation is at the expense of the public school district. So those are the words that are used. So that payment, you're not getting reimbursed for it. I wouldn't put yourself in any position where it's like, okay, I'll front the money and then you'll pay me back. That doesn't seem.
They're not processing expense reports for parents at the.
No, I don't. I would not recommend going that route. So let that be taken care of. Once you say to the district, hey, I'm on the wait list, or I got into this place, we're going, here's our time, then they can handle that.
Okay, that sounds good. And then just another plug for your website, kyepadvocate.org. You can also find KYEP Advocate on Instagram and on Facebook, but specifically on the website, there's a link to those procedural safeguards notice. And so while you're also being handed that in the meetings, if you lose it or you want it to look it up, just know that it's easily accessible via the website as well. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe some examples of when you disagree, like what are those flags? I know that we kind of talked a little bit about like your experience at home is for whatever reason not matching the results in the report, or what does that kind of like look like in real life?
So I think that there's some really good examples. One very common one that I think is underused a lot for a lot of reasons is not supporting a student's access to communication during an assessment. So if the student uses a communication system or a communication device, and that's how they access communication, it's important that that is used during the assessment report. Otherwise, you end up being in a position where your assessment is the evaluation is about the access to education, and it's not about general intelligence or academic performance. It's about the fact that the student didn't have access to communication during that. So if they're presenting these results and you're looking at them and you're like, this is not the kid I see, this is not the kid that I know, this isn't, or at no point do they mention the fact that they have used the device and this is how the student is responding, then that's a good indication of, I disagree with these results. Likely you're going to be getting general intelligence scores that are lower because the student didn't have access to communication. So you would disagree because you think your kid's IQ is higher. So that's a really good example of that. When you're looking at specific learning disability, and we can talk more about that eligibility, but you need the academic performance scores and general intelligence scores. You need to document a discrepancy between the two. So your general intelligence is your capacity for learning, how well we would expect you to be doing based on your intellectual ability. And your academic performance is, what are you doing in reading, writing, and math? And we expect those for most people to be the same. So based on your IQ score, we expect you to be doing this well. So if you have some low performance and they test your IQ to be low, then you may hear, your kid's doing just as well as we thought they should be doing. While we do recognize skill deficits, we don't expect them to do any better because their IQ is in alignment with this. So if you disagree with that IQ because you think there is a discrepancy, you think their capacity for learning is higher, then that is the point where you would request the independent educational evaluation.
And then, like with the initial evaluation, at the end of the independent educational evaluation, would you also expect a similar meeting to follow up, and kind of that should look the same with the same team involved and all of those types of things?
Yeah, you'll have the assessment report from the independent educational evaluation. From that evaluator, you'll have the assessment report. You'll be able to review that. You can go over it, they'll go over it with you there. In general, the school's not going to pay for that person to come to the meeting and be with you. So if you want them to come with you, then you'll need to pay them to come with you. But if everything is written down, again, back to that written record, you can say, they can come with you and they can say all kinds of things. But if that's not written in their report, it's really hard to go back and find things if they're not taking really good notes in a meeting. So you'll be able to bring that independent educational evaluation back to the team. You'll review that as a team. Sometimes you may want to be like, see, I told you so, but that doesn't get you anywhere. So
Yeah.
Get all that out of your system before you go and just say, here's another person's opinion, and this seems way more in alignment with what I see for my kid. The district has to consider results just the same as they consider them if they don't pay for them. But in reality, because these are all businesses, if they fork over the cash for this assessment, they likely consider it differently than if you fork over the cash for this assessment.
That's a good tip. And again, just making sure to put everything in writing. If you've set up that specific email address for this situation, but keep using that, keep it all kind of housed in one area. And the other kind of like key takeaways for that specific, the independent educational evaluation, that key piece.
I would, if you're going down that route and if you're looking for an independent educational evaluation, I would ask everybody that you know for recommendations about where they went that they were satisfied with their assessment. Because if you go someplace and you're not satisfied with that assessment, you don't also get to go back and be like, I didn't like that one either. So that's just going to this process just continues to go on and on and on. And in reality, the purpose is to get accurate data to make educational decisions so you can be providing supports and services and interventions that are appropriate for your kid.
Mm.
If you're not picking a place that you're comfortable with and you don't get assessment results that sound like your kid and you want to go someplace else, this just further prolongs no access to services or limited access to services. So you do want to be mindful with who you're going with to make sure that their their philosophies, their skill set, what they're doing is all in alignment with what you're looking for as
Mm.
far as disagreeing with the school district's assessment results, and that you just trust the person that you're going with.
Yeah. That's really, really helpful. And again, if this is resonating with anyone who's listening, go to kyiepadvocate.org. Also look for KYIEP Advocate on Facebook and on Instagram. You will see a plethora of resources and just like, asking the people around you for recommendations, like building that network of support and just making sure that you feel like you're walking into these situations and you're well informed, you've got the things that you need and you're feeling really confident. I think those things will help you. So thanks so much for deep diving into this. In the next episode that'll be here, we'll talk more about what we mentioned previously was a meeting notice document. We'll do a little bit of a deep dive on that. So check out that one if that is resonating with you as well. But thanks so much.